Ex-cons of Reddit, what's the worst thing that happened to you whilst doing your time? Serious. I suppose seeing people getting taken advantage of all of the time and then not caring was the worst. New guys coming in and getting ripped off on trades and stuff. People with social/developmental issues just getting their food taken from them. Also, the psychology of people without goals gets weird. What was worst was just becoming part of that world. There are so many people there that have their rights taken away from them on a regular basis and don't care anymore. They choose to place value on being able to make others fear them. They stop thinking about the world beyond the walls and just get all wrapped up in the weird culture of the place. There was a day I was feeling proud of myself because I was running around organizing contraband trades, setting up poker games, and owning things like hardcover books and the only dice in the place. In that moment of pride I realized I had started to lose my mind. It's honestly hard to remember the months in there because most of the time nothing's faking happening. Nothing. You've read until you can't stand it. You've slept all you can. You can't play cards cause your cellie is sleeping. So you stare at the ceiling and wait. It's so weird to realize you're doing the equivalent of time out for months. You're not waiting for 5 minutes. Not waiting 5 hours. You're waiting for a day that is months away. Just waiting. TLDR, it's like being in a DMV with a bunch of assholes and your number isn't up until next January. Edit, missed an S in there and restructured a couple sentences for clarity. Edit 2, you/Thekau reminded me of the other thing that was awful on the human psyche. You're not really a person in there. You might have people that care about you on the outside, but they are still living their lives. The guys you play cards with are only trying to pass time, just like you. The officers don't care. You're just another pain in their ass. You just wear the same linen pajamas every day and just exist. My family came to visit me on Christmas Day the first year I was in. I was so ashamed that I had a little breakdown the next day and punched the cinder block wall inside my cell. One of the guards invited me to come talk to him. I made the mistake of thinking he was a friend and was talking about the meaning of life and why things happened. He decided he thought I was suicidal, which I wasn't. The next day I was shipped off to a maximum security prison in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, stripped down naked and given a Kevlar smock to wear. They keep the temperature down at 60 degrees, which means that you have to stay huddled in a corner to conserve body heat. Because this was observation, I wasn't allowed to have anything. Nothing to read, watch, etc. Naked and cold for an entire week. If you'd like to see what this is like, turn your thermostat down, then take all your clothes off and sleep on the floor of your bathroom with the light on for 6 days straight. No showering either. Wasn't offered a chance to clean myself. That's how I spent New Year's 2007. Observation is not some kind of psychological treatment. It's punishment and mental torture. Sleeping and singing to yourself is all you can do. Too cold to do anything else, faking brutal. Now I try to go out of the country for New Year's Eve every year. This isn't something that happened to me, but it's something I observed while in. My life was uneventful in my time, which was only about 4 months, and only during nights, because I had multiple releases. Anyway, our jail was divided into sides and floors. The higher up you were, the worse of an offender you were. 1L was the floor with the men with releases or protective custody. 1R was women. Up through 5R and L, which were serious violent offenders. 1L was 12 individual cells. 5 x 8 feet, surrounded by a larger cage, 1 TV in the dead middle. Our floor got the new arrivals who mostly, myself included for the first 2 months, had to sleep on rubber mats on the floor. One day a young black man whom I knew from childhood was moved onto our floor. He'd been in the system since about 12. He had finally been granted work release. The guards hated him. All the guards were white. They didn't pull any punches. This was the year 2000. He was about 19 at this time. The night they moved him in was uneventful. The next morning, his release was for 6 AM, to be at work at a restaurant at 6:30. The overpass guard was an asshole who loved doing things like dropping our food, or releasing us late, or holding us for an extra inspection, or whatever. That morning, he was too busy to let this inmate out until 9 AM. Our only phone was collect, and he did, for whatever reason, turn it off that morning so none of us could use it. Kid finally gets out, his ride still waiting, and beats feet to work. They actually let him work till noon, at which point he came immediately back, like he was supposed to, during which time they made him sit in the Sally port for about 5 hours w/o food, water, or bathroom. So he gets in, after dinner, and goes back to his cell, pretty dejected but not being bad or disrespectful. The next morning, they do the same thing. He gets to work, and the manager can't do much but fire him, so he comes straight back to work, and calls his PO on the way, and she calls the jail, to tell them that he won't need his release the next day. So he comes back on the floor, and pretty much immediately gets on the phone his lawyer and family trying to find a new job. Cue the big fat guard beach. She comes walking down the floor, outside the second cage, laughing, saying something like how was work X? To which he responds you know how it was. And she, and I swear to God she said this, says something like shoulder known a lazy netga wouldn't get to work on time. Looks like you're going back upstairs with the rest of the monkeys. We're all kind of appalled that she'd say that, and we are all white dudes. So he says something like, don't you have anything better to do? Which was of course what she was hoping for. Lockdown she says loudly, which is where we all go back to our cages or mats. We all abide. She gets on her walkie and says her clothes first left and locks us all in 3 hours before normal time. He says something like you ain't gotta take it out on all these dudes. They didn't do nothing. And she says shut up and mate. On your knees. Now you have to remember that she's 6 feet in front of him and none of us can see because we're all in our cages. Only the cage next to him can see her really because he's in the last cell. So she starts screaming at him, calling him names, making fun of him, nasty stuff. So, he calls her a beach, or something. She pulls out her can of faking bear spray, giant pepper spray can, and just hoses him down, and the rest of us, by proximity. Then she calls in the response team, which is just one dude and his dog, and they haul the kid out, not fighting, in cuffs and drag him away, leaving the rest of us to wheeze on pepper spray for the rest of the night. That was one story. I can tell you about the guy with the wheelchair, or the littering guy, or lots of stuff. Edit. Thanks everyone for your comments. I didn't expect this to get this big. I feel like I've had a pretty wild life and I love talking about the crazy things I've done. 8x felon Eagle Scout EMT with SAR dogs. Okay. I've worked in youth residential group homes, worked as a counselor, taught public school, had to restrain lots of folks, been stabbed by students, been deposed for very technical ladder related issues in big lawsuits, seen some crazy abuse, and I'm happy to share about all of it, because I think our stories should all be shared. For the record, I was originally charged with 28 felonies and something like 15 misdemeanors for B&E. Effectively, the DA took every single unsolved B&E from the previous year and charged me with it. We couldn't afford the $10k my lawyer wanted to go to trial. That was after the $10k he charged just to represent me. So we took a plea bargain of 8 felonies in 3 groups, all B&E. I was supposed to receive 1 to 10 years in the state pen for each one. But the judge realized that things weren't what they seemed and instead grouped the charges and sentenced me to 3 to 30, suspended it, and gave me 6 months in county with releases for work, school, and community service. So I pretty much just spent the night in jail for 4-5 months. Really lucky and really not too bad. I won't say that I was innocent. But I also won't say that I was remotely guilty of what I was charged with or what I pled guilty to. My PO, that's another whole series of stories, decided I was the poster child for reform and had me speak to her interns about recidivism and corrections, and then for an unknown reason decided I was bad and tried 3 times to revoke my probation, all unsuccessfully. I graduated with a 3.7 overall GPA in 2003. I did 3.5 years in Texas prisons. I believe that the worst story I can recall was my first full day in a state jail facility, used as a transition center for up to 2 years before one is sent to a real prison in Texas. A guy came up to me asking if I smoke cigarettes. I didn't but thought, why not? So he told me to head to the gym when that time came later that afternoon. We went to the gym and fired up a cigarette while we walked around the basketball court. As we were walking around the court, we approached the universal gym machine, where a variety of people were using the various pieces to work out. The guy who offered me the cigarette advised me to follow him to the other side of the basketball court and to stay away from the universal gym. A few minutes later a guy sat down and leaned back to do some bench press when 4 guys grabbed him, 1 on each arm and 1 on each leg. 2 other guys pull out cans of chili or fried beans as both were available in socks and proceed to hammer the guy in the face. The guy at the bench press had his face completely caved in. All I could think was, what have I gotten myself into? I also recall one other time when I was at the pre-release facility at the beta unit where a guy had his face cut up with a box cutter and his throat slit over $20. The guy who died even had about $40 worth of cigarettes on him when he died. I never had anything happen to me directly Peresi. There were a few fights I got into over various things, usually just respect. Now I'm just rambling. Did 7 in Pennsylvania State Prison. Saw a guy who was accidentally cleared by psych to be in general population go out to yard and try to cut his own head off with the razor wire. It was morning yard, not a lot of people out, and he sprinted toward the fence as soon as he got out there. We all thought, oh shit, we've never seen someone try to get over these forests of razor wire, but then this faker turns around with his back right up against the fence. Cops coming from 3 directions yelling into their radios, and he loops a circle of razor wire around his neck and starts sawing. A faking waterfall of blood. Cops froze. Everyone froze. That shit was really unexpected. They told us he lived, but fuck me if I know how. Edit. Since you're asking, it happened at C Somerset, down in the lower yard. Yes, most of the razor wire is up top on the fence, but there's a single run about 8 feet up the face of the fence, maybe to just discourage you from testing out the rest of it. He found this one section in the corner of the yard, where the fence makes a bend, where that run was sagging down enough he could reach up and grab it. I always thought the pain reflex of holding on to faking razor wire would made him stop, but nope. The craziest part is that prison can be months and months of literally the same thing over and over and over, like everything's painted the same color. Then that guy over there is trying to cut his head off. Oh wait, huh, like that. And prison doctors faking suck so hard. Probably gave him ibuprofen and sent him on to the hospital. He did it cause he was crazy. I'm going to give you a family story. My cousin got into some cocaine and heroin problem shortly after his mother died. He did a robbery at knife point on a local shop where my brother now works. Anyway, he goes away for 10 years, serves 8 and was released 3 years ago. He has a wife and 2 kids and is doing really well, so happy ending. The story that comes to mind. During his 5th year he is one of the longest serving members of the prison, short stay prison in England with only a few people serving sentences over 2 years. Anyway, he gets a guy living next to his cell and starts chatting with him in the cafeteria. They become friends, and after about 3 months people think nothing of it. But 3 months after he arrives, the inmates break into the back office of the prison and find everyone's records. They find out my cousin's mate has been transferred to this prison because his last prison found out he was a kiddie fiddler and he was moved for his safety. My cousin gets told flat out while at dinner one day, so and so has been done for kiddie fiddling. Do something or you both get it from us. Fearing his safety, my cousin goes over and whacks the guy straight in the jaw with a tray, breaks his jaw and a couple of teeth. My cousin proves he was not sympathizing with a pedo and didn't get his head kicked in. Sent into solitary confinement for 2 weeks. Came late and I've shared in a similar thread about the guys getting beat to death in front of me, so I'll share my worst that I was involved in. I was arrested in a different state after skipping out of my home state. While waiting for extradition back, they don't fuck around. County maximum security. I'm in with the worst of the worst. All murder, rap, kidnapping charges. So my only experience with jail prior to this was watching the Shawshank Redemption Oz prison shows on TV. So I'm scared shitless. I'm a big guy. At the time 6'6", about 280 lbs. Pretty solid fighter, but I know I'm in with hardened criminals that will kill me for a cupcake, or so I thought. Anyway, first day in, I stay in my cell. Sleep all day, think about my life. Halfway through the day a group of the biggest guys come in and ask for my papers to make sure I wasn't a bedo. Later I talk to my cellmate a bit and he seems nice. Says he needs a spades partner and I know how to play. He says the next day we will play and he will show me around. Next morning we sleep in and around 11 go down and get a game. I'm like a scared rabbit looking around checking my back just waiting to get shanked. We get to playing and I'm getting to know the guys. Everyone seems cool. I'm good at spades and so is my celly, so we are kicking ass. After a few games the other team is getting agitated and I'm gloating a bit. So the guy to my right eventually gets upset and starts yelling calling me a cheat and this and that. I brush it off, but am on full alert just waiting for a fight. So when he yells "fuck this" and "fuck you," he stands up and I pop up and blast him in the face as hard as I can. He crumples to the ground and starts spitting out teeth. Everyone in the common area just stares at me like what the fuck? It was later explained that people get upset at card games but never fight in view of guards. Edit. After typing this, I realized how tame it is. If anyone wants to hear about the guy getting beat to death I'll type it for ya. Well, I'm late and none of my friends Reddit, so fuck a throwaway. I spent 10 months in a ranch and 13 months in juvenile hall. I know it isn't the same as prison, but I was just an innocent kid, so it was extremely hard. The worst thing that happened to me actually occurred when I escaped from the ranch I was at. At that point I had spent about 2 months in juvenile and was at the ranch for about 24 hours. I was in one of the only opportunities I'd have to be unsupervised, so I ran. I ran for 14 hours and through 4 cities before coming to a road. After walking so long and being so tired I was desperate and started to stick out my thumb to hitchhike at about 4 AM as I walked. After a while a car actually stopped and let me hop in. A baby-faced nervous looking man was driving the car. I tried to make small talk to divert attention from the fact I was wearing bright orange pants. I thought he might know I escaped, but in mid-conversation he just blatantly grabs my business. Looking back I wish every day that I beat his face in inside that red car. But instead I just ask him to pull over. Surprisingly, he does. I wasn't trapped or anything, but that sheet will haunt me for the rest of my life. Phew, I feel a lot better. Not an ex-con paresi, but you might find this story a bit interesting. I stayed in Thailand for an extended vacation, 6 months, to train in Muay Thai. My dad is Thai, was taught since childhood, also as a sort of finale to my normal life training camp, before entering medical school. This is relevant later. I get arrested for possession of marijuana, quite a substantial amount too, and of course, sent to jail. I had to stay in jail a few days whilst my uncle was settling the fine. Parents were in the Philippines at the time, as my mom is Filipino. Anyway, my 4th day in jail, a fight breaks out because this dude stole the other guy's blanket. I was surprised how fights break out over petty things. Anyway, there were 4 of us in there. Me and the 4th guy try to break up the fight. He was a pretty sensible man. So the dude who got his blanket stolen, attacker, was over the other dude, and he was sorta punch slapping him. Anyway, as I pull him back, he spins around to me and by instinct, I leap back. Guy pulls out a short ice pick looking thing and charges at me. I don't know what I was thinking at this point. It was probably instinct though, as I kick him in the face. Shin landed on his zygomatic bone / side of face, and he falls to the ground. Blood starts to gush out. I was like, what the fuck? I didn't think I would cut him with a kick to the face, as it rarely happens in Muay Thai, but when the guards come in and turn him over, I shit you not, the edge of his mouth till his upper cheekbone, close to the eye, was wide faking open. Dude looked like a bloody version of Joker's face. I get bailed out 2 days later, slap on the wrist, my uncle managed to pull through. Anyway, I was able to enter medical school as my mother is a pediatrician, and all of this has been left behind us. I'm currently in my 2nd year of med in the Philippines. Earlier this sem, in our surgery class, our professor, a surgeon of course, talks about how he stitched up this prisoner when he volunteered in Thailand during our suturing module. Apparently the prisoner was kicked in the face, and he even had a picture of the prisoner in his PowerPoint presentation 0_0 anyway. I have to head off to school. Be back in a few hours to answer whatever questions, if this gets any reply at all lol. Did 4 years 4 months in a prison in Colombia, South America. For most people that are sentenced to more than a year, prison becomes a vacuum cleaner that sucks up your savings, your marriage, relationships. It is a really hard time for most. I was engaged at the time. She hung in there for about a year and we parted ways. For you, life screeches to a halt while life rolls along on the outside. One interesting thing that happens is that prison is like a filter that sorts out who your friends really are and who are your real friends. It goes the same with family. Your prison is also hard on you psychologically. You have time, a lot of time to think. For most people, being left alone with their thoughts can be stressing. One thing that would reduce any tough guy into a quivering coward was the word remisión, which is the term used when they transfer convicted inmates to other prisons around the country. No one wanted that. It wasn't a good thing. While I was there were riots, got tear gassed a bunch of times. One time the big boss gave the order that every cell block barricade themselves, and one cell block took a couple of guards prisoner. This was on the news, and it was a big deal. They brought in the GRI, Grupo de Reacción Inmediata, Group of Immediate Reaction, sort of a SWAT for prisons. These guys came seriously armed. When they ran in front of our cell block gate, all the guys ran into the cell block. Me and 2 other less experienced convicts stayed by the door watching. When one of them stood in front of the door and pointed his H&K MP5 at us. I don't know anything about guns, but the other inmates were calling it out. We put our arms in the air. The guy next to me starts screaming, "Don't shoot us, we are not armed." The other guys started praying, so I called out the same thing, "Please don't kill us." The GRI officers start yelling, "Shut the fuck up and pull your pants down." We do exactly that, and we took our shirts off for good measure. The guy tells us to get on our knees, hands on top of our heads. We are only in that position briefly, because shots ring out from another cell block. The guy and some others run toward the gunfire and me, and the 2 other guys run into the cell block. The first thing the prison does is cut off the power, phones, and electricity. We were on lockdown for 2 days. It was really intense, and I really thought we were done for. One night everyone is in bed sleeping, when suddenly someone starts screaming in pain. I thought that someone was getting killed. I was scared shitless, because you have nowhere to run, nowhere to go. But I started hearing people getting up and talking. It turned out that a roach crawled into the guy's ear. After that it was toilet paper in your ears when you go to sleep. One day a young kid got caught stealing some old guy's disposable razor. The old man was begging the houseman not to hit the kid, but it was too late. Examples have to be made. We all had to stand by and watch this poor kid get beat like an animal. Afterwards, I wasn't the only one with tears in my eyes. Another terrible thing was on visiting days. We would all bunch up by the gate of the cell block waiting for our visits. You would see a new inmate receive his visit and most would break into heart-wrenching sobs. That was hard to watch, mostly because you remember the day it happened to you. Mothers, wives, brothers, sisters, they were all heartbroken, and it was your fault. It just sucked. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it wasn't just one thing, it was many. Sorry for the long post. My dad was released from prison 2013. I didn't visit him very often because I was 16 when he left and was very hurt, but we've had a lot of conversations about what happened while he was in there. He tells me over and over that the worst thing for him while he was in there was the isolation. While he was in there I was arrested and later went to rehab. My brother was in 2 DUIs and nearly died. My mother served him divorce papers almost as soon as he got in there. As a hopeful future father and husband, I cannot imagine a worse scenario. You literally have to sit around while the people you care about the most fade from view. Slowly every day you wonder if they are thinking about you and if they still love you the way you love them. You have to wonder what they are going to be like when you get out in years. You see your family is brokenhearted and you can't reach out to them, not only because they won't let you, but because you physically cannot leave. Edited for anonymity. My experience is pretty weak compared to most of these other posts, but here it is. I haven't told this story in a few years, so this is as best as I can recall it. I did a mere 6 months in a county jail for false public alarm in 2006. I was young, I was dumb, whatever. I only had one bad experience, and it was on my 3rd day there. Woke up for showered 630 am. At this jail, they delivered your pre-trade food to your cell block, and at this time I was in intake block, where you stay for a few days, before they put you in Gen Pop. There wasn't a cafeteria type line or anything. Anyway, I get my food and sit down at the table next to my cellmate, who happened to be a fairly large, skin-headed Nazi type dude. Sorry, can't think of a less offensive way to describe him. And we were talking, normal sheet. Suddenly I get a tap on my shoulder, and it's this massive black dude. Very intimidating looking, jacked dude. He says to me, "Give me your food." I was scared, no joke, but I thought to myself, this is jail, man, stand up for yourself. So I said no. Again, "Give me your faking food." "No, you already have food." He gets in my face and yells/spits, "Jim, your food," and went to grab my tray. I thought fast and decided fuck it, and knocked my entire tray of food on the floor. There have it, you want it so bad. No sooner had I said that when I saw stars. Guy sucker punched me right in my left eye. Surprised I didn't get KO'd. Did get a pretty nasty black eye, though. My cellie sprung immediately to action, along with 2 other skinhead dudes who were at the next table, and they start pummeling this dude. I threw in a few kicks to his body while he was down. Never got to do that before. Guards show up, break it all up. Me, dude, cellie, and the other 2 dudes get put into segregation solitary while they investigate. I thought to myself at this time, well, there goes my good time. Day for me, great. Seg sucks. I was in there for 1 sleep and another half day when guards come and let me out. Turns out we had a snitch in our block. Gave the guards a completely detailed account of how it went down. Me and my cellie, not sure about the other 2 guys, as I never saw them again, got to go back to our block. Never saw big black dude again. It was a scary situation. And the only situation where I felt unsafe or feared for my life. I'm sure it's worse in prison, but I was only in jail. All in all, 6 months in county felt more like summer camp. I learned my lesson and have and continue to be a free man. First thing was actually the ride from county to the prison, where I would pull my time. They had me trussed up like a turkey, feet and hands in cuffs, which in turn were locked to a waist chain. I couldn't stand up straight or take more than tiny shuffling steps. They transported me alone with 2 guards for an 8-hour ride. I had a reputation as a badass, and they were paranoid I would do something or someone would try to break me out on the trip. Halfway through the ride, I needed to use the bathroom, and the closest place was at a rest stop. They let me out, and as I was shuffling in with armed guards on each side, a mother and child came out of the bathroom. The terror in that child's eyes made me swear to get my life together when I got out, and I did. Once inside, the main problem was thievery. If you didn't put your inmate number on everything, it was subject to be stolen. They would even steal your toothbrush if you didn't scratch your eye in on it. Edited to add with armed guards on each side from just plain shuffling in. I worked as a guard in a military prison for 4 years, and after reading the stories in here, I'm glad as fuck I didn't transition to federal corrections when I got out. The sheet I read about in here, I didn't see either, but my buddy witnessed 2 events. One where a guy in the labor yard took his shovel and full on swung it into the side of a guy's face, shattered his jaw, and dropped like a sack. Lived. After his surgeries were done, he was transferred to a different facility. Another guy was an MP who was the arresting officer of an inmate when the MP was sent to the jail. I don't remember what he did, probably some possession charge. We had a few prior MPs in the jail. He didn't remember the guy at all, but the inmate broke his jaw with an elbow coming out of the shower one day. His wasn't so bad off as the first guy. He stayed for the rest of his sentence, but was kept in a different block than the other inmate. The head cook was pimping out her female cooks to the inmates. Their families would wire money to the head cook, who would then get that inmate assigned to kitchen duty so they could fuck the female cooks. As a result of this, we had to man an extra guard to stay in the kitchen at all times. The head cook was sent to Leavenworth and the two she was pimping out were dishonorably discharged from the army. Outside of that, the worst altercation I've seen was 2 inmates fighting in a block and knocking the TV over. 40 inmates in the block collectively went oh shit no, and once the fight was over they were all asking us to check on the TV and hoping it still worked. Didn't give a shit about the 2 bloody dumbers we took to segregation. That TV though, fortunately it did still work. Put it back on its stand and plugged it back in and came right back up. The place I was at was mostly pretty laid back. We had a saying, it's 360 days of boredom with 5 days of excitement. It's worst in the hot days of summer and around Christmas. Tempers flare and everyone is depressed. Oh, there was also a time where a female guard was doing a block check and walked into the shower, which wasn't on, and found an inmate laying along the wall, head/neck on the floor, back and legs up the wall, jacking himself off cause he was trying to eat his own cum. She wrote him up for that. Was faking hilarious to read that report. One guy had a heart attack in the rec yard. One of the inmates we had was a ranger medic. He was there because his chute line got stuck jumping from a plane and he shattered his jaw. Seems like there's a trend. And when he recovered he had permanent jaw pain. Since he was a medic he kept writing his own narcotic prescriptions so he wouldn't have to see the doctor, which is a big no-no. So he was sent to jail for drug abuse. Anyway, when the inmate had a heart attack in the rec yard, we sent a newbie private to run up to Delta Block for this inmate cause he was the only one the guards knew had any experience with this kind of shit. When the paramedics arrived he gave a full account to them of everything that was going on and very well could have saved that guy's life. Happened to someone close, let's call him X, put in maximum security Australian jail for 3 years. So basically, each inmate was given a loaf of bread. This bread was meant to last you, and you ration it for eating throughout the week. You had bread and water and the meals given to you throughout the day. No other food was allowed to be bought or kept in the block. Now, the rule that no one is meant to break is faking with someone's bread. Because if the guards go on strike you literally don't eat, you're locked in your cell with water and bread. Most jails are now run privately, but used to all be run by the government. This was 16 years ago. At first I was like, no way, they have to feed you. They have to have guards people to look after shit. Well apparently not. Some guards did go for the $$, not enough to monitor everyone and feed everyone. Now I'm not sure why, but cheating in stuff is super popular in jail. Especially women's jail. Another personal story, and people would cheat in beds, pillowcases, under the mattress. X was cunning, never really getting caught, and never really not noticing. Like how do you lay your head in a pillowcase full of sheet? This kind of stuff did you get you bashed, but not really a big deal apparently. Most inmates had 2 pairs of shoes. X was down to 1 pair. And this aboriginal fellow shat in his shoes, and managed to get bay powder to mask the scent. Oh no, he stepped in shit, but wait, there is more. This was literally 2 weeks before his release. So X for 2 weeks ripped a hole in his mattress and shat in it. For 2 weeks. Non-stop sheeting in his mattress and sleeping on the floor. The day before his release he switched the beds when he got a chance, and while that was happening also shat in his bread. So this aboriginal is left with a mattress filled with sheet. Can't swap it. Can't get a new one. Until someone else leaves. TLDR, guy I knew shat in a mattress for 2 weeks then left it with someone who shat in his shoe. I did months in Salinas Valley State Prison in California. I'm white and considered a square, no tats and not gang affiliated. I got called up with a Mexican kid who was a member of the Salinas, Southern California Mexican gang. He tried to take my bunk, which was the bottom, and about more coveted. Of course I wasn't going to get punked and told what to do. Right before dinner he pulled my jacket over my head and started punching me. Just for reference, I'm a Sandan, 3rd degree black belt in Aikido. I stood up and repelled him. I had him pinned by an arm lock and a squeeze of his nose and jaw. He said he would quit. He came at me again. When I let him go, I blended his punches and got him in another arm lock and headlock and showed him I could crush his skull on the bunk. I told him to chill out and we would talk shit out. He said we were cool. I saw his fists balled up and he was ready to swing again. I told him, "No wonder your mother killed herself. You are a disgrace." He came at me again, and this time I started punching. I had his head clamped, and I was jumping my knees into his face and body. I heard the clanging of keys, and knew guards were on their way, so I dove to the ground and covered my head. They opened the cell as he was weakly raining punches on my covered head. They beat the shit out of him and pepper sprayed him. I didn't have a mark and said we just had a misunderstanding and things were cool. He said he was going to get me, so he was put in administrative segregation. Crazy day. Nothing bad happened to me, really. I did see some fights. One girl punched another girl square in the face and nearly broke her jaw over salt and pepper shakers. In prison, we all worked in a factory setting, and one girl had her foot run over by the electric pallet jack. It was faked up, and she had to be hospitalized and then on bed rest for months, then was only able to do in-house work and couldn't go back to the factory. The worst thing that happened to me personally is going to sound kind of vain. I waited 11 months in county to be sentenced. If I ended up with over a year, I would end up going to prison. The day of my sentencing I got 2 years. Going to prison meant cutting my hair. Prison rules state it has to be above shoulder length. I had been growing my hair out for years. It was past my waist. It's really the only feature I liked about myself. I didn't want the prison guards to have to cut it, so the day of sentencing I went back to my pod and cut my own hair with a pair of nail clippers. I was all cried out from my sentencing, but some of the older women cried at me cutting off all that beautiful hair. I explained that I didn't want to go through the dehumanization of someone else cutting it, so I hacked it off myself. The good news is, I don't have a problem with getting my hair cut anymore. I just recently cut it to a little bit shorter than shoulder length, and I have bangs and everything now. But I still don't let anyone else cut it. I only cut it myself. It's sort of stupid, but they take so much away from you. I didn't want them to have my hair too.